full of like things like hopes, dreams, wishes, but also the future. So it's mostly the hopes and dreams and things that do end up coming true. There's Saturn, more about soul work, Uranus, more about soul contracts. But yeah. Welcome back to the Wilding Astro Tarot YouTube channel for an astrology video on how to predict your future using your birth chart in astrology. This video I'm super excited to make because I find that this part of the chart is really fun and interesting to learn to read, and there's always some cool shit there. So for today's video, we're going to learn what you need to know, or the things that you need to know what your placements are, what they mean, and how to put them together to create like a pattern or a bigger picture about what your chart says about your future using your natal chart. So everyone's is different, and I'm gonna post some examples of people's futures on my TikTok page. So yeah, once you've watched this whole video through and had a bit of a go at it, if you need a little bit more help figuring out how to read it, looking at the examples on my TikTok page will be really helpful. I'll be posting them as soon as I'm posting this, or while this is uploading, I'll be posting those. So yeah, that's something cool that we're going to do today. I do want to disclaim before we get started that yeah, this video is going to be teaching you how to do it yourself. If you want to learn how to do it yourself. But if you want some help, if you want some professional help, I do have astrology readings that you can request with me, and you can add on a Read My Future mini reading to any of my major astrology readings. So I offer natal chart readings, I offer detailed love life readings, I offer 6 months transit readings to find out what's ahead for you in the next 6 months, and I also offer synastry readings between you and someone else. So on any of those readings, you can add on what is my and or my partner's future. So yeah, I can read that for you. Just letting you know that if you get through this video and you're not finding it helpful, maybe it's, you know, a little bit too complicated, I can always do it for you. But if you want to learn how to do it yourself, stick around because I'll be explaining that here. So we're going to start with everything that you need to have in order to make it through this video and find out what your future is going to be according to your birth chart. The first thing is obviously your accurate birth chart. So you need to have the correct date, time, and place of your birth. Even a few minutes or a few hundred kilometers difference can make a big difference, especially to the degrees of certain placements. Because some placements can move super quickly. And yeah, we've got to have it all accurate. Now, my advice is always to pull up your birth chart using Placatius, however you say it, house systems, because this is how the sky was actually orientated at the time of your birth. If you pull it up whole sign, everything's going to round off. It's a little bit more simple to read, especially if you're a beginner. However, I find personally that it's much less accurate, especially if you're born closer to the North or South poles, because that changes how wide houses appear on your chart. And also if you're born kind of later in the rising sign, if the rising sign had mostly risen over the horizon at the time of your birth, then it's going to affect how your chart is read. It's going to change how everything is orientated. So it's always better to look at your Placatius/Placatius. I've heard it both ways. I don't know which one it is, so I'm just saying both. Yeah, house systems to get the most accurate reading. You can use whole sign house systems if you're wanting to identify chart rulers. And that's the only time where personally I find it's like doable. Every other time you're going to want to use, your Placatius house system. The other things you need is you need to know what sign is on your 11th house cusp. So what sign sits where your 11th house starts on your chart, and you want to know if there's more than one sign on that house as well. So using Placatius house systems, you can have anywhere from 1 to 3 houses especially if you're born like close to the poles. You could have up to 3 houses there. So you want to know every single sign that's on the 11th house. You want to also know if there's any placements inside the 11th house for you. You want to know what the 11th house ruler is. For this one, you can use whole sign. And you also want to know what your Saturn and Uranus placements are, especially like where they're placed. So like house, degree, like everything. That's everything you need to know to be able to build the little Lego tower that is your future. They're all the building blocks that you need. Okay, so let's start with why we look at the 11th house. This is the main thing that we look at and where you always start to read your future in the chart. And the 11th house, the reason why we look at it is because it is the place in our chart that houses our future. It's full of like things like hopes, dreams, wishes, but also the future. So it's mostly the hopes and dreams and things that do end up coming true. There is an element of some of it potentially being unfulfilled in this lifetime, but 9 times out of 10, most of the 11th house stuff is all going to come true. It just sometimes takes a while until it does come true. There's usually like a little bit of hoping and wishing for it before it actually eventuates. So yeah, the 11th house is the house of the future. That's why we always look there. And this is also why you can look at 11th house transits, for example, when Venus or Jupiter moves through it, to look for lovers, because not only are those placements trining your 7th house descendant line, so your partner line, but also it's moving through a future house. So both of those things are happening at the same time. So it's just like more likely to result in like a future person. That's a bit of a sidebar, but like that's trying to paint a picture of like how this house works. Like there's an element of it that's like a hope or dream coming in, and then an element of it of like in the future this is going to manifest in a certain way, if that makes sense. You also need to know any placements inside the 11th house, because that's going to color the 11th house and color your future as well. So not only do you need to know the sign, you also need to know any placements in the 11th house, because that's going to have a lot to say about kind of the future that's destined for you. Then you also need to know what the 11th house ruler is. So each sign has a ruler, and this ruler will tell you kind of a little bit more detail about kind of more the condition of your future. Like, what does the future look like? Next, we also look at Uranus and Saturn. And the reason why we look at these 2 placements is because Saturn has a lot to do with like soul contracts, but more to do with our soul work, like how we're supposed to contribute kind of as an individual, especially from more of our masculine energy, like how we're supposed to kind of participate in life and like add to life's kind of expansion, evolution, and the evolution of kind of like society as well. And then Uranus stores soul contracts. So Uranus tells you more about like who's your future going to involve, like who's going to be there, what are y'all going to do together, like yeah. So to try and summarize it, basically the sign or signs on the 11th house and the placements inside the 11th house give you an idea about the themes of your future, like what's the future going to involve for you. The Saturn placement tells you like your more personal contribution, you as an individual, like how you're contributing to society. Uranus is like who's doing your future with you, like who's along for the ride. And then the ruler of the sign that's on your 11th house, that planet, its energy tells you a lot about the condition of your future and also which house and sign and degree it's placed at. Yeah. So, yeah. 11th house, chart ruler, more about the condition. 11th house, more about the themes. Saturn, more about soul work. Uranus, more about soul contracts. But yeah, we're going to go into it in a bit more detail. I'll show you examples on the screen of some of the things that this can be referring to. So let's start with the sign on the 11th house. So someone with a Taurus on the 11th house is more destined for potentially like a life of, say, more luxurious things. Like it's very Venus-y ruled. So people with a Taurus 11th house tend to have like a very nice future. Cancer on the 11th house is the maternal energy. Likewise, Capricorn on the 11th house is more of a paternal energy. Cancer can also be like maybe someone a bit more spiritual, introverted, like doing a bit more homebody time, whereas Capricorn can be like more hardworking, like out in the world doing stuff, like very career orientated. Having Leo on the 11th house is like usually a performer, which is why we have so many Libra risings that are performers, like Jennifer Aniston, Beyonce, people like that, because not only is their rising sign like the sign of beauty, very Venus-y ruled Libra risings, very symmetrical, very aesthetically appealing, but also they have Leo on the 11th house, which is all about that like kind of performance, showmanship energy. What else do we have? If you have, let's say, Scorpio on the 11th house, like you might deal with a lot of like financial investments, occult, maybe there's like some danger in your future. Sagittarius is more about personal development, maybe higher learning, philosophy, things like that. So there's some examples, but there's plenty more on the screen for you to look at and kind of sift through. Like whatever resonates, usually you're in the right ballpark. So you also want to take note of any placements that are inside the 11th house, because that can add a little bit extra color to what your future is going to look like. So if you have, say, a Venus in the 11th house, this can be like a future destined to have like lots of either love or luxury or something like that. If you have the sun there, it could be like you're kind of going to be a star in some sense, or like the attention's going to be on you, or you're going to be like, it could just be like you're going to be very creative, like enjoy life a lot. Sun there is like a really good sign of like lots of kind of play and enjoyment. Or Saturn might be like more of a hardworking energy in that sign. Mars potentially like passion projects. Yeah, so whatever placement's in there, that'll definitely add to what you can expect in your future. You do want to note what degree those placements are at, because for example, a Mars that's at a Capricorn degree is more like going to be about like that motivation, hardworking side of Mars. So that might be like more of a career orientated energy. But like if it was at a Mars that was at like a different degree, like maybe a Gemini degree, maybe you're going to be like more passionate about like speaking, writing, things like that. But maybe it's not going to be as career orientated. It's going to be like more fun. It's going to be the more passion project for fun side, rather than passion project for like making lots of money and being like a career thing. So yeah, look at the degree, because it'll color that placement one way or another. Sometimes it might just like add an extra layer. You just have to kind of use your intuition to discern whether it's kind of coloring the placement in one direction, or whether it's like kind of two layers of your future in one placement. And usually it's very obvious. It's two layers when they really contradict each other, when the two energies contradict each other, but when they can complement each other in a way, that's usually where it's just like coloring that placement in one direction. So yeah, that's something you want to take note of as well. So for your soul work and how you're contributing to society more broadly as an individual, you want to look at your Saturn. So the three things you want to note about your Saturn placement is what sign it's in, what house it's in, and what degree it's in. Now, everyone born around the same time of you will all have their Saturn in the same sign. So everyone within kind of a year and a half-ish period, depending on retrogrades, will all have the same Saturn sign. Like everyone in your year growing up all had the same Saturn sign. So this one, like, kind of take as a very light brush, like very broadly speaking, but really pay attention to what house and degree it's at, because that'll be way more personal to you and speak way more towards your personal journey when it comes to like what you're supposed to be doing in life. So yeah, like Saturn in Aquarius, like very rebellious, like just kind of take that as like a bit of an overall theme, like don't read into it too much. Saturn in Pisces, maybe about spirituality, about like the collective unconscious, like undoing some of the conditioning that we get in life. Aries, like way more cardinal, way more like leaders, self-starters, things like that. So very much take the sign as like a bit of a light brush, but then really look at the house and the degree. So if your Saturn is sitting at like a fourth house, that's more about like family, maybe being on your personal spiritual kind of journey in this life. If it's at a in the 5th house, it might be more about like maybe being in entertainment media, being more about kind of pleasure play, maybe being more of an individual, being more creative and self-expressive. 6th house more about lifestyle, health and fitness, and just kind of living your life. 7th house more about relationships, potentially law and contracts, and also kind of like art and beauty and stuff as well. But then you also want to look at the degree and see how that kind of changes the energy, because a 5th house Saturn at a Leo or Venus degree can be more about kind of experiencing the pleasures of life. Saturn in the 5th house at just a Leo degree could also indicate like fame, like being in the entertainment media, like entertaining people. Saturn in the 4th house, but maybe at a Pisces degree is definitely more spiritual side of that 4th house. Whereas if it was at a Cancer degree, it's way more about the like family element of the 4th house. So yeah, really using the degree to either, again, paint it in one direction or potentially using it as 2 layers, especially if they contradict each other a bit more. So when it comes to who's going to be involved in your future, like what soul contracts you have to be around certain people in your future, you want to do something similar, but this time you're looking at Uranus. So for Uranus, you want to know what sign, what house, and what degree it's in. But again, with the sign, you want to take it as a very broad brushstroke. Everyone born within a similar time frame to you, like 1 to 2 years-ish, depending on retrogrades, is going to have the same Uranus sign. So taking this kind of more with a grain of salt, just like being more chill about that part of your Uranus placement and like really focusing on the house and the degree, because that's way more specific to you, and that will tell you a lot more about like who you're really destined to be around when it comes to your future. So for example, if you have an 11th house Uranus, you're meant to be around like friends, community, like kind of networks of people. 10th house might be like more maybe the elite, so it rules like things like reputation, social status, but also like colleagues, like people that you're going to spend a lot of time working with. 7th house is like more long-term partners. 5th house is more like dating, like romance, but also children. 5th house Uranus, really good sign for having children and spending a lot of time around children in your lifetime. 4th house is about family. This can be the family that you're born into or creating your own. So yeah, they're the things that you want to look at to know like, yeah, who's supposed to be in your life in the future. With this, again, looking at the degree will add either an extra layer to this, especially if the 2 layers kind of don't make sense together that much, they kind of contradict each other. It can just mean that like both will be present. And this can be like, especially if you have like maybe a 5th house Uranus at a 10th degree. So you have a 5th house might indicate children, but you might be like a working parent because you have your Uranus placement also at a 10th degree. So you might be around your colleagues a lot, but also have children in your future. Yeah, so you want to know if it's like adding another layer or contradicting. Sometimes it's not super cut and dry. It might just be a little bit of mix of both. But yeah, again, kind of following your intuition to figure out like kind of who you think might be in your future, because you're probably going to have a bit of an idea. And then just, yeah, looking mostly at the house and the degree to find out who's really going to be around you, like who's destined to be around you, who's contracted to be around you in your future. So the last thing you're going to look at for your future is you're going to look at the condition of your future using the 11th house ruler. So whatever actual placement the 11th house ruler is will add a color to it. Like for example, Libra risings have Leo on the 11th house, and Leo is ruled by the sun. So not only do you have a like I'm a star kind of energy on your 11th house, which can definitely indicate like being an entertainer, being a performer, but also you have like a sun placement as the ruler of the 11th house, which is like, look at me, I'm a star. And this is why we have a lot of Libra risings like that are stars, because like think of like Beyonce, Jennifer Aniston, Britney Spears, like all Libra risings, all like very aesthetically pleasing facially, because Libra is the sign of beauty, sign of symmetry, like they're always like very attractive, but then they also have Leo on their 11th house, and they have their sun as their 11th house ruler. So they're usually destined for like kind of fame and success. It's just like a really good way to have your chart orientated if that's what you want out of life. If you have something like the moon there, it might be a little bit more introverted. It's also a maternal energy, so you might like want to have kids. If you have Saturn as your 11th house ruler, more career orientated, or like you might just find that you're more hardworking in your future. If you have, let's say, Mercury as your 11th house ruler, you might just be more like into talking to people, writing, speaking in the future. It'll usually give a very similar energy, obviously, than what was there. So you're kind of like doubling down kind of on that energy. So you do also want to look at the house and degree that it's placed at, because that's like, again, adding like a little bit more flavor to the condition, because obviously the ruler is going to give off a very similar energy to the sign that you have there, which we've kind of already gone over. So you want to look at where that's placed, and that will give you a good idea about like how that's going to manifest in your life, like how those 11th house themes, like what the condition of them is going to be, like maybe a bit more specifically. Because yeah, the house that it's placed in, the degree that it's placed in, again, is like adding more nuance, and also way more individual, because like every Libra rising has Leo and the sun as their 11th house sign and 11th house ruler. So yeah, you really want to look at the house and degree that it's placed at. So kind of adding on from what we're just talking about in terms of Libra risings having Leo as their 11th house, and therefore the sun as the 11th house ruler, where that sun is placed can give you an indication of kind of what area of their life they're going to be that kind of entertaining personality, that performer. Like you would expect a lot of singers to potentially have their sun maybe at like speaking, writing kind of areas of their life. So like maybe a second house, third house kind of energy. Maybe if they're an actor, it might be like more of a fifth house thing. Maybe if they're supposed to be like vlogging their daily life, it might be more of a sixth house thing. Maybe if they're going to be like famous for like just their social status, like maybe they're born rich, like maybe they're a nepotism baby, like maybe their sun might be in the 10th house, also could be in the 4th house if they're a nepotism baby. It could go either way. So yeah, like looking at what house the 11th house ruler is placed in will give you a lot more color of like kind of the condition of how that 11th house is going to manifest. Like I'm a Cancer 11th house. I have my moon in the 8th house. So this is like the house of like shared resources. So this like definitely can give trophy wife energy for sure. It's also in the house of occults. Obviously I talk a lot about the occults on this channel and sexuality and things like that. Like that's just what I'm interested in. And also it's at a Gemini degree, which is a writing and speaking degree. So I'm kind of like already doing my future in a way. Like I've got that energy kind of going for me already. So yeah, that's kind of like how you can interpret it. And that, yeah, looking at the degree for like that extra layer. So if you had Leo as your 11th house sign and then therefore had the sun as the ruler, also having that sun at a Leo degree is like doubling down on like fame, spotlight kind of energy. Whereas yeah, if it was at a different degree, like say it was more of a Venus-y degree, it's like maybe the more kind of like play and enjoyment side of that Leo energy rather than the like being in the spotlight energy. So yeah, you really want to look at the degree as well to kind of see how it skews or adds another layer as well. So basically what you have to do then is like once you've looked at each of those placements and looked at like every element of that placement, like sign, house, degree, like all the things, that's where you kind of have to look at all of them kind of more big picture, see how they all relate to each other, what's the relationship, how does one theme kind of flow into the next, and then you're kind of trying to recognize a pattern, see what pattern is kind of consistent through all of those placements with all of that kind of like flavor, to read kind of the bigger picture story that they're telling. So this is kind of the hard part, and this is what you get really good at doing readings professionally, is like picking out the patterns and seeing how things relate to each other. That's definitely the hardest part, and that's usually where people need an astrologer, because usually it's very good to, it's very easy to break it down into little pieces, but then when you're trying to see the bigger picture by looking at all of them, that's where it's hard. So yeah, I'm always here if you need, like, just add on a future reading to any of my readings and I can read it for you. But yeah, that's the next step, to kind of like piece it all together, see the bigger picture they're creating, and yeah, what all of those placements say about your future and like the many facets of it. But I'm going to post some examples, like I'll do my chart, I'll do Carrie's chart, I'll do like maybe a few other people, like just comment on my videos who you'd like to see examples of when it comes to different people's futures, like mostly celebrities that I can kind of find their birth time and be pretty sure it's accurate is better. Let me know who you want to see, and I'll do some breakdowns on my TikTok page going through like what each person's chart says about their potential future. So usually older people, like a bit more of their futures manifested, so they're really good people to practice on. So yeah, if you see any like older people that you know their chart, like definitely look at that for practice, and like maybe go back through this video, use their chart, and then once you've got a good idea about how to apply it, then maybe go back to yours, especially if you're a bit younger, especially if you're before your Saturn return, because you're a lot less locked into your chart then, and so it might be a little bit harder to read your future. After your Saturn return, it gets way, way, way easier. So yeah, that's my advice. Check out my examples on my TikTok. Link is in the description box below. Link is also in the description box below if you want me to read it for you. Just add on a future reading to any of my astrology readings. And then, yeah, maybe practice on some older people to get a good idea if it's still not making sense. I'll include the slides that I used throughout this whole video at the end of this video. So you'll be able to come back to this video and just go through slide by slide, one slide at a time through the whole process, like starting with the 11th house sign and then going all the way through to the condition. So the 11th house ruler, like through all the steps, through Saturn, through Uranus, like everything in order. So that's something that you can come back to if you don't need to hear me kind of talking about things. If you want to like just go to the information and kind of like pick out bits and pieces and start to thread some stuff together, I'll include all the slides at the end for you to kind of refer to every time that you want to do like a future reading on someone. That's going to be the best place you can go to, yeah, like see what all the parts mean, and then to kind of think of a bigger picture that they're telling. So I'll leave that there. And yeah, practice, do all the steps that I suggested, like look at the examples, practice on older people. And yeah, I'm here if you need help. Just add a future reading to any of my readings. I feel like I'm repeating myself now. I'm just like, I can't remember what I've said and what I have thought to say but hadn't said yet. But I think that's about it for this video. It's been a pleasure walking you through the process, and especially the whys of like why you look at these things and why this order, like I feel personally makes a lot of sense to like look at everything in. So yeah, hopefully you found it helpful, and I hope for most people, especially if you have like a bit of a good understanding of astrology, this made a lot of sense, made it super easy for you to read your future. Yeah. But yeah, I think I'm gonna leave this video there until we see each other again. Thank you so much for stopping by. It's been a pleasure teaching you how to read your future in astrology.